Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, My Granddad is a Legend. My granddad spent close to 60 years in the building trade, starting when he was 16. This is a story he told me today of when he first started at 16. So my granddad starts working at this one job site back in the 1960s, never done any building work before, so they put him with a very experienced worker who was the supervisor of this job, or foreman, if we use trade language. The foreman was the sort of hardline supervisor nobody likes, but he gets the job done. One day he gets my granddad to mark bricks on a wall with a pencil, measuring for one thing or another. Now foreman insisted on using a white pencil, so it stood out from the red bricks. Only it was winter, and had recently snowed. So my granddad, happy as anything to get back at this hardline foreman, went and marked up everything on site that needed to be marked. Foreman comes back an hour later to check, can't see anything, and accuses my granddad of slacking. Granddad happily points to where he had marked the bricks, and wipes away some of the recent snow to prove it. Then he hands in the day's paperwork, completed in white pencil, and wishes the foreman a good evening. As my granddad tells it, the guy got very red in the face and insisted from that moment forwards that standard grey pencils would be fine from that point on. The next one is titled, Put the Animal's Health First. Okay. A few years ago, I worked at a big pet store. The one that people feel intelligent for shopping at. Part of my assigned duties were to come in every morning before opening and take care of the small animals. That meant feeding them, but also cleaning out their habitats on a weekly basis. The most difficult habitat to clean by far was the aviary. The store manager had regularly chided me and other employees for not having it done in time for opening. There was also a sick room for the retail animals that arrived or became sick, injured. Every closing manager was responsible for signing off on that room. Animal has water, animal has proper temperature variance in habitat, etc., and every morning manager was also responsible for this at the beginning of the day. On this particular day, I noticed a bird cage about 12 feet up on a shelf above the sink. I had seen finches in it the week before, but there were none I could see from the ground. There was no stool, stepladder, so I figured I'd get started on the aviary before I got chewed out again and asked my department manager about it later. 10 minutes pass, and my department manager shows up in the aviary. I mention the empty bird cage to him, and he thought it odd since he saw them the day before. Turns out the finches died overnight because their water was not refilled by the closing team and the closing manager signed off on it anyway. Later that morning, the store manager calls me and my manager into the office. She told me that I was irresponsible for not checking on the finches when I first went in there, and that their death was partially on me. I told her that they were clearly dead before I got there this morning, and I checked in with my department manager 10 minutes after I noticed their empty cage. I also mentioned that the closing manager and another co-worker signed the checklist as if they had taken proper care of the sick animals. To the store manager, it didn't matter. She would not let me leave her office without me signing a formal write-up. She said, "You need to put the animal's health first." This made my blood boil. Just the day before, she couldn't tell the difference between an anole and a chameleon, and Steve Irwin was my role model. Enter malicious compliance. For the health of the animals, I sought a group of people who are for their ethical treatment. I told them all about the conditions of the sick room, including the birds that had recently died. They actually organized a gathering to pick at the store that very weekend. It just so happened that that weekend was also a huge sales event for the store. I overheard the managers on that Thursday talking about how they were anticipating $10,000 to $14,000 in profits that weekend, and it turns out they only got close to $4,000 thanks to Peter. Better yet, there was never a checked box in the sick room that wasn't actually followed up on again. Not while I still worked there anyway. The next one is titled, You Want My ID? Fine, I'll hold up the line while I go get it. So to set the scene, I am closer to 40 than 30 and maybe look early to mid-30s. So yesterday I was in Asda, UK supermarket, doing the weekly shopping, all the normal stuff you will need for the week, which was a full trolley load. As a treat, I thought I deserved a few bottles of Prosecco. Now a lot of people in the UK are back to panic buying, so even in the middle of the day, the lines for the checkout were pretty long. I maybe waited 10 minutes to get to the conveyor, load my stuff onto the belt and start packing. The Prosecco were the first items on. So the lady on the checkout picks the bottles up, looks at me and says, "ID please." This is not normal in the UK when you are over 25. I was just like, "Lady, I'm late 30s and I just came out with my card and keys." She was adamant, "No ID, no service." I was disgruntled but couldn't be bothered to go to another supermarket, so I just thought I will call at another shop on the way home. Cue malicious compliance. Halfway through packing I suddenly realized that my passport was still in my car from my recent trip abroad. So halfway through packing and with half a trolley load still on the conveyor, I informed the lady I would go get my passport from the car. Well, my car was right at the front of the store, but I took the 5-minute detour and walked as slowly as possible. It must have been a good 10 minutes to retrieve the passport. Gave her the passport and packed my things up, all while smiling very nicely. I apologized to the lady waiting behind, but she was just laughing and said, "No way should you have needed that, and good on you." The next one is titled, "As You Wish Mother." A couple days ago, me and my sister were hanging in the kitchen while our mum was making dinner. Our dad was in the next room. This is important. My sister decided to lie on the floor for some reason, and I was pouring myself a cup of water from the jug in the fridge. The jug has a lid that you push down on one side and it allows water to flow out. I closed the lid and was tilting it above my sister's head, pretending to pour water all over her face. As little sisters do, she complained loudly, and my mum said, as I quote, "Don't pretend to pour water on her head." So I did exactly that. I opened the lid of the jug and started pouring, but I'm not a total dick and just poured it onto the floor next to her head. My sister was pissed and my mum was getting angry at me, but my dad said, "Hey, he did as you told him to do." Mum has been very careful of her wording lately. The next one is titled, "Wasn't allowed to spit toothpaste into the kitchen sink, so he." My 8-year is afraid of the dark and has a habit of spitting out his toothpaste into the kitchen sink because he doesn't want to go to the bathroom alone. Finding slimy loogies in the kitchen sink grosses out my husband, and apparently, my husband has told the 8-year that he can't do it anymore. Well, tonight, I was being a stellar mother and bribed him with 30 extra minutes of screen time if I didn't have to read and cuddle tonight. Don't judge. So I thought that I had scored 30 minutes of downtime and totally gotten away with it. Wrong. His bedroom is off the kitchen and he must have heard his brothers talking about having a glass of orange juice. He came running into the kitchen saying something about "Don't drink the orange juice" and "toothpaste." He has a language disorder that makes it difficult to understand him, and since I was shooting for Mother of the Year award today, I just assumed that he was afraid his brothers would drink up all the juice and immediately sent him back to bed. His brothers poured some juice but it looked cloudy. That's when I realized what had happened, which he later confirmed with a sheepish smile. He had brushed his teeth but didn't dare go to the bathroom alone. He wasn't allowed to spit it in the kitchen sink, so he unscrewed the orange juice that was on the counter and spit the toothpaste into that. And then very politely rescrewed the cap on and left the container where he found it. He's a very obedient boy. The next one is titled, "Outdoor Recess Really Isn't That Important to Me." This is a long one. You've been warned. I don't know why this didn't come to mind sooner, but it was probably my youngest feat of malicious compliance ever. I'm still this little girl, all grown up. Lol. Pray for my husband. Background: I went to a Catholic school that had the traditional uniform every guy dreams about for some reason. White shirt, plaid skirt. Our uniform rules were strict about everything. Shoe color, sock color, jewelry, etc. And in those rules, it was clear that the girls could wear tights under their skirts but nothing else was permitted. No leggings, no sweatpants. Yoga pants weren't a thing back then, but they'd have been out of the question, too. Your choices were bare legs, pantyhose, or tights. So when winter rolled around, we were cold. Like all the time. The school was a big old marble and limestone monstrosity, so it was drafty and chilly. And we were just cold. To this day, I'm still always cold when I shouldn't be, and I wonder if years of being too cold just set in somehow. Anyhow, onto the story. Guess what else is cold in winter? Outdoor recess. What sadistic evil jerk of a man thought it was a good idea to force children to play outside in the cold without protective layers is beyond me, but that was the school policy. The boys got pants and blazers, so they were always warm enough, though they might catch a chill. And yes, we could take our jackets, but imagine being outside in a winter coat and a knee-length skirt. The coat was only helping so much. While the boys played, we girls would huddle next to sewer grates and storm drains in the area, trying to stay warm by the steam. Or if a delivery truck was on campus, we'd lean against the engine to leach some of the heat. I don't know how the faculty could watch this and just not care, but they never did. Then we got to 5th or 6th grade and they wanted to teach us responsibility. This meant not just grades affected when we missed homework, but punishment as well. I wasn't aware of the new rules until I missed my first homework assignment. I don't remember why I didn't do it. Just that it was an honest mistake. Maybe I left the book I needed at school? Maybe I forgot we had an assignment? I don't know. But that first case was totally accidental. So I come to class and don't have my homework. The teacher tells me to see her after class. Okay. She tells me per the class contract I signed at the beginning of the year, since I didn't do my assignment, I have to stay late and eat lunch when everyone else has already gone out to recess, thereby missing recess. I was bummed, but oh well, that's what I get for screwing up. But then I served my punishment and it was great. Everyone was done eating, so there was no line in the cafeteria. The lunch ladies were just packing up and felt kinda bad for me, so a few of them asked if I wanted extra of anything. I found a seat in the entirely empty cafeteria and realized it was nice to eat in silence instead of the cacophony of hundreds of other students. Still, lunch and recess were our only real chance to socialize all day, and I wanted to catch friends I didn't have any morning classes with, so I asked the teacher in charge of lunch detention if I could go outside, since technically the punishment was late lunch, not missing recess per the rulebook. She declined and said that the late lunch was a means to take away recess as a punishment, so I had to stay in the whole time. Okay, I get it. I'm the one who screwed up. And that was that. Or so I thought. I spent the next couple months being a diligent student and turning in my assignments. But then the weather began to turn cold. Our recess conversations began to tilt to the same topic they did every year. Who had found a new source for thicker tights than we had worn last year? We had gotten quite creative, and though we hated the look, most of us had a giant stash of cable knit tights. Think of a knit sweater on your legs. The problem with knitted wear is the holes, though. So though we looked warm, we still froze. Then one day I missed another assignment and the same punishment ensued, and I had an idea. If I just didn't do my homework anymore, I'd get lunch detention every day and I wouldn't have to go outside in the cold. I'm a genius. So I stopped doing my homework in my class with the nicest teacher. I'm not entirely stupid, but I was in 5th grade, so not smarter than the adults around me yet. After like 3 days, the teacher pulls me aside and says if I don't have my homework tomorrow, she's calling my mum. Crap. Next day I have my homework for that class, but I skip another. And that gives me my idea. The rules say that if I miss my homework in any class, I get lunch detention that day. Unless it's already after lunch, and then the detention applies to the next day. So if I'm careful about which classes I skip the work in, I can stagger my missed assignments enough that the teachers will just think I'm flaky but not doing this on purpose. So that's what I do. Some days I miss a morning assignment, so I get detention that lunch. Other days I'll miss both a morning and afternoon assignment, so that covers lunch that day and the next. 4 classes in the morning, 4 afternoon classes, I could stagger and randomize just enough. I kept this up for about a month or so, when the teachers must have started comparing notes, or the lunch detention crew began to wonder why I was always in trouble. I wasn't sure what flagged the system, but Mum got called. Why isn't Voodoo daughter doing her homework? Is something going on at home that we should know about? Is she under any stress we haven't been informed of? Is she struggling with any subjects? Remember posh private school. They want to be seen as caring, just not about us freezing to death. So Mum sits me down. Why aren't you doing your homework? And I explain to her about being cold. About how the punishment of a quiet, late, solitary lunch with a good book in the warm cafeteria is way better than a loud lunch followed by a cold recess that I never really got warm from for the rest of the day. I explained to her my system and that I was still getting good grades on my tests. I understood the subjects and I wasn't skipping things I needed to work on. But I didn't see how there was a downside. I was doing less work, but maintaining my grades. I got to stay warm. I, an introvert, got to eat in a quiet space for my meal. And the school was unwilling to offer any alternatives. Gotta give Mum credit. Not only did she admit that I made complete sense, she told me she was proud of me. They had created the system and the rules. I had disagreed with them, found a way to live within their system and get everything I wanted. Here I was, 10 years old, and I was navigating bureaucracy better than most adults. She called the school and insisted on an in-person meeting with my principal and my homeroom teacher. She basically laid it all out. Mum, my daughter says that she and her friends were reprimanded and made to take off their clothes in front of the class when they tried to wear leggings and sweatpants outside to recess. Is this correct? Principal stammers. I thought we were here to discuss homework issues? Mum, we'll get to that. Apparently when the girls wear anything but socks, pantyhose, or tights even outside during recess, they are reprimanded, and if they try to wear them indoors during class, they are made to take them off right there in the classroom. Is that correct? P. Well, yes. M. So I just want to get this on record. My daughter was willing to sit in this cold building all day in your dress code and only violated it when she was outside in the freezing winter temperatures, and you decided that her health wasn't as important as your dress code? P. Well, they're outside, you see. Anyone driving by can see the schoolyard, and to have all the kids out there wearing whatever M, like all their bright colorful puffy winter jackets they're already wearing on top? P. It's our policy to teach these ladies to look like ladies. To prepare them for adulthood. M. So you refuse to change your dress code policy about what the girls can wear outside on their legs? P. Yes. I'm sorry. That won't be changing. M. Then my daughter won't be doing her homework. Shocked looks. She doesn't want to go outside, but if she does her homework and asks to stay in, you tell her no. When she goes outside, you won't let her wear warm clothes. So she stopped doing her homework because it's the only way she can find that you'll allow her to stay warm. I fully support her system. Mum then explained my system to them. And how if they weren't willing to change the rules, I was going to continue to abide by their rules and there was nothing they could do about it. I wasn't failing any classes. I wasn't hurting anyone or disrupting other students. I was just enjoying something that was meant to be a deterrent, and they had no idea how to handle it. She told them that she couldn't think of one good reason I should comply and do my homework. If it was getting me nothing but benefits and zero drawbacks, then what reason did I have to keep up with my homework? The principal was stunned. You mean that right here in my office you're giving your daughter permission to not do her homework? My mum turned me and said, if you keep your grades up and you let me review your system and I approve of how often you're missing each class, you have my blessing to skip homework. Just enough to stay indoors for recess. No abusing the system. It's a stupid rule and I'm proud of you for finding a solution. She looked back at the principal. Does that answer your question? The principal looked back stunned but said nothing. Eventually nodding and letting us go. After all, what could they really do about it? That's kind of it for the main story. But there's more for those who like a good long read. I kept up my routine for another few days, and that's when one of the lunch monitor teachers came over and told me if I could eat a little faster, she'd let me run out and play with the other kids. I thought that was odd but told her, no thanks. I actually prefer it in here to out there. She looked bummed but didn't say anything. Then like 2 minutes later, she chimed in again and I knew who had ratted me out. Well, you see. If you're in here on detention every day, I have to be in here with you to make sure you're not misbehaving. And that means I don't get to go outside with the other teachers and chat. Every day, one of us has to stay in here with you and miss out on the one time of day we all get to socialize. So I'll make you a deal. If you eat quick and hurry out there, you can still get a few minutes of recess and I can chat with the other teachers. AHA. So that's what got me pinched. Now I wasn't just annoyed. I was pissed. They called my mum and got me a conference with the principal also they could have their lunchtime gossip session. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, you can go and play with your friends when you change the dress code or the weather gets warmer. Just cold, emotionless. To this day I get shivers thinking about the way I delivered that line to her. She backed away and didn't bring it up again. When I told my genius mum about the incident that evening, she laughed and suggested I explain my system to the other girls I knew also hated being cold. I didn't understand the gleam in her eye at the time. I was only 10 after all. But I did tell my girlfriends what was up, as I had been keeping it a secret to stay out of trouble. But now that my mum and the school knew, why hide it from my friends? So I told all the girls I usually bitched with about why I kept missing homework and staying in for recess. Before I knew it, we had a small indoor recess group. All of us rotating through skipping homework just enough to keep us inside every day. This went on all winter until the weather warmed up and we were happy to go outside again. The next year, when things got cold again, I was pulled aside and asked if I thought an indoor recess option might suit some students. And that if we could keep the volume down, we were welcome to stay in the cafeteria after lunch while others went outside. Wow, you're still reading this? Okay, last bit. The second year was much the same, only we didn't have to skip homework. We were just allowed to stay inside if we wanted to. On warm days, no one did. But on cold days, all the girls would stay inside and the boys would be outside, yay for blazers and pants. We were a gender-separated school, so the only time the hormonal boys even got to see the girls was recess. It wasn't long before they were complaining that the girls never come outside for recess, but they didn't always want to be inside, and it was stupid that the dress code kept even the girls who liked outdoor stuff inside because they'd rather be warm. By the time we reached 7th grade, they reworked the entire uniform. We had summer and winter uniforms. The girls could wear pants and button-down shirts in winter months, and they even designed us school sweaters so we could stay warm. And that is the story of how my little 10-year-old self changed the entire uniform code at a 100-years-old private school. The next one is titled, Mum Makes 18-years-old Me Sleep on Same Bed as Her Whenever Dad Feels Like Sleeping Alone, so I Take Up Almost Whole Bed. Before I get to anything else, this was not intended, but it gave results, and yes, I'm from different country where kids do sleep on same bed as parents. Now my dad has this office guest room where there is a proper bed and sleeps there at night whenever he feels like. Especially when he isn't feeling well and doesn't want to bother my mum. But mum also refuses to sleep alone, most probably because of dreams of her late father. She always wants either me or dad to sleep on same bed. One thing about my mum is that she takes up 80% of bed. So yesterday night, instead of taking only my blanket, I take 2 additional pillows because honestly I can't sleep without them. Turns out mum hates them because they take up all space, and guess what happened tonight? When dad said he's gonna sleep in another room, mum instantly says no. Mission accomplished. The last one is titled, Ask Me to Call Me a Witch to Your Face. Okay. I was a horrible kid, father was abusive physically, so I thought violence was okay. It was not in this instance. I failed grade 10 math because I was also a horrible student, so I was held back a year. I was a strong lad, growing up working on a farm mucking stalls, hucking hay and straw bales builds up some good strength. Also I played AAA hockey. I was stronger than the average person my age. Some guy I'll call Fred started making fun of me, calling me stupid, wasn't wrong, and other names. I tried shrugging it off, asking him to stop. Teacher didn't do anything. After 2 days of this, I called him a witch and told him to duck off or I am going to slap you upside the head. Fred called me a pussy and dared me to come over and say it to his face while still calling me names. So I got up and walked towards him. Fred was staring at me like a deer in headlights, got about an inch from his face and said loud enough for the class to hear, "You're a witch." I wound up like I was going to give an elephant a one-armed hug, and I open hand slapped Fred in the face. Him and his desk fell over. The teacher said, "Monarchism, get the hell out of my class right now." So I left while people were laughing at the kid I shouldn't have slapped. I got in no trouble from school, little different when I grew up than it is now. A year later he got hired on at the same place I worked at. When I saw him I asked, "Are we going to have any problems?" Fred vigorously shook his head no and said, "No problems here." I apologized for my previous actions and all was fine. Thanks for listening.